All right, in this domain 9, we are going to be talking about fairy tales. So we will talk about this week and next week. During other domains previously in the year, you heard about fiction and nonfiction. So I want to ask you what the difference is between fiction and nonfiction. So if you could turn to somebody in your house and pause the video and tell them the difference between a fictional story and a non-fictional story, go ahead and do that now. Now in this domain, you will learn about a special kind of fiction story called a fairy tale. If you have heard about fairy tales, I would encourage you to share with that same person in the room what makes a fairy tale what it is. Okay, so how are fairy tales different from other kinds of stories? You can go ahead and do that now. Okay, so this is an elements of fairy tale chart that I have prepared in advance, and this is for Cinderella. Now, each of these things that you see on the chart is a characteristic of a fairy tale. So the first characteristic is the setting. The setting of the story is the place and time in which the story takes place. And then there's characters. Characters in fairy tales are people and animals who are featured in the story. They can be both real and magical. In this domain, you will hear tales about characters including princesses, princes, giants, witches, and even animals that can talk. Although some of the things that happen in fairy tales could happen in your life, many of the things that happen in these stories are fantasy or a kind of make-believe that can't really happen. Fantasies are tales that have a plot, just like other stories, but fairy tales often have imaginary or magical events, sometimes known as elements of fantasy, things that couldn't really happen in real life. Okay, they also have problems and solutions. In fairy tales, the characters often face some sort of problem which is solved by the end of the story. Characters' problems are often solved in fairy tales, and you will have the chance to compare fairy tales to see how they are alike and different. And as far as an ending, fairy tales always end happily. They lived happily ever after, right? Okay. You have already heard of a fairy tale this year, which was Cinderella. In Cinderella, the setting where it took place was Cinderella's house and the prince's palace. When it took place was just once upon a time, right? It doesn't really tell us exactly when. It happened at some time. The characters, we have some real characters and some magical characters. The real characters are Cinderella, her stepmother, her stepsisters, and the prince. The magical characters are the fairy godmother, the mice and the horses, the rat, and the coachman. Okay, now the fantasy in this story is that the fairy godmother appears and uses magic to make Cinderella's wish come true, turning a pumpkin into a coach, mice into horses, and a rat into a coachman. Now, every good story has problems and solutions that arise in the story. One of the main problems in Cinderella is that she is not allowed to go to the ball. Her stepmother forbids it. Luckily, though, as a solution, she has a fairy godmother who uses magic to make it possible for her to attend the ball, right? She changes the pumpkin into a coach and so on in order for her to be able to go to the ball. The next problem, though, is that the magic her fairy godmother uses, it wears off at midnight. So that can make things a little tricky, right, when she's trying to dance with the prince. Luckily, however, the prince sends his men out to find Cinderella after the ball, using a shoe that she left behind. And just like every other fairy tale, the ending is that they lived happily ever after. You will hear more fairy tales than just Cinderella in this domain. Many fairy tales, including the one you'll hear today, were collected long ago by two brothers named Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. They are often called the Brothers Grimm. The brothers lived in a place now called Germany, and many of the stories that we now know as fairy tales had been told orally or by mouth for many years in their country and in other countries too. The brothers decided to write the stories down and make a book out of them. You may have heard of some of these fairy tales before, but some may be completely new to you. If we look at a map of Monticello Academy and we zoom all the way out, here's the United States, and we come over here, then we will find Germany. This is where the Brothers Grimm lived. This is where they collected their stories and where they told their stories, meaning that most of our fairy tales that we know today are from Germany. In today's fairy tale, and in another fairy tale you will hear later, we will hear about spinning wheels. This is a picture of a spinning wheel. Spinning wheels are tools used to spin thread and yarn. Do you see that very pointy part of the spinning wheel? That is called the spindle. It's a stick-like tool on the spinning wheel where the thread or yarn goes after it is spun. People use certain parts of plants, such as cotton and flax, or wool from animals like sheep and alpacas, and even hair from certain goats and rabbits to make thread or yarn. This is some yarn that has been made and dyed different shades of blue. Yarn is made by spinning, or tightly twisting the plant fibers, wool, or hair around and around until they form a long piece. That's what that spinning wheel was for in the last slide. Most thread and yarn is made by machines in factories today, but some people still use spinning wheels to make their own thread or yarn. This is a video that will show you how some yarn is made out of the wool from sheep. There's a small part of the video where you will see someone using a spinning wheel.
In Australia, there are more than 75 million sheep. That is more than 3 sheep per person. Sheep are domestic animals, which means they have been tamed to live alongside humans as pets or as farm animals. Sheep can live on big farms with thousands of other sheep, and once a year they are shorn so they can stay cool during summer, and their fleeces can be made into many different products. To make these products, including sweaters or jumpers, firstly the sheep grow their wool. That white fuzzy hair isn't actually hair, but is naturally grown wool. To care for the sheep, you need a nice big paddock with lots of grass, water, sunshine and shade. Sometimes sheep live in huge paddocks with thousands of other sheep on big farms in Australia. Once a year in spring, the sheep get their yearly haircut, where the shearers, who are special people whose job it is to shear the sheep, cut or shear the sheep's fleece. While the shearers are shearing, other workers are sorting the fleece and packing them into bales to be sold. The wool can either stay in Australia or be sold overseas. Once you are ready to use the wool, you need to give it a nice wash to make sure it is nice and clean. There are big machines that can do this, and it washes the wool up to 8 times. Once the wool is dry, you need to comb it like brushing your hair, but this is also done by a big machine. This brushing of the wool is called carding, and it removes all the sticks, thorns and knots from the wool. It is then straightened into a nice, long, thick, woolly roll. Instead of staying white the whole time, you can dye the wool into many different colours of the rainbow. You can even make a mixture of different colours. The wool is then spun. This is where the wool is twisted together to make a long, strong rope, which is called yarn. The machine then joins the yarn together by weaving or knitting and turns it into clothes, curtains, blankets, socks, carpet, and even your beanies and scarves. Sometimes you can see your mum or grandma doing this with their knitting needles or crochet hooks. Once the item has been machine knitted or hand knitted, you then get to wear your nice, warm, comfy, new woolly clothing or snuggle under a nice, warm, woolly blanket. Once you're finished with your wool clothes, they can be recycled by unwinding the yarn and made into new clothes or other items. Nice and sustainable. Wool is very important to Australia, as you can use it for many different things, all supplied by the one little animal on the farm, the sheep.